Hello everyone and welcome back to the Artificial DM. We've all heard it. I know you've heard it. I've said it on this channel, tons of other narrators have said it on their channels, all the D&D educators have said it. No D&D is better than bad D&D. That is what Irish Fritter titles his tale. We're going to be looking at this RPG horror story where he goes into details about why he quit his D&D group. Met a small group at a game store and they offered me a spot at their D&D table. I've never gotten to play as a player character before, so I was looking forward to the game. We had been warned a few days before that her campaign was going to be roleplay heavy, so I pulled a bard I'd been working on for a while out and got ready. I showed up about an hour early and worked on putting my character on paper. The DM shows up an hour later and greenlights my character. She warns that this game is going to be 90s themed, but that it shouldn't affect too much. 3 other players show up. One player is playing a lovable mound of flesh known as Gus the Barbarian. I like this guy. Another one decided on a noble druid, a little on the shy side. And then the problem player reveals his character. Now, everyone was in the same group chat. We had all known it was going to be a roleplay heavy game, similar to Undertale. So he brings in a min-max barbarian with +6 strength. I had actually helped a bit with the backstory on this guy the previous night, but I didn't know it was going to be used here. Nothing wrong with min-maxing, but it needs to be tempered correctly. I could tell the DM was a first-timer, and I could see this wasn't going to end well. After 2 more hours of character creation, in which I am mainly helping, the DM just prepped her notes and left to get a drink with the problem player. He would later come back and mess around with magic cards. But finally the game started. It was 5 PM, but I figured I could still play for a few hours. Everyone is teleported from wherever they are to one spot. Druid and problem player know each other. Apparently, problem player's character was an aristocrat and knew the druid because he was a noble. Gus and I know each other. He was a folk hero and I was a bard. It's natural. We start to describe our characters. No one really pays attention to Gus, who was doing some phenomenal role-playing for a first-timer. The druid goes next, and then problem player immediately grabs them and decides to investigate the forest we spawned in. I sit back, refusing to help progress the story until everyone gets a second to introduce themselves. I finally get to describe my character, a bubblegum pink tiefling, if anyone was wondering, and pass it off to problem player, who gives a lackluster intro, and proceeds to try to press on with the story. I decide I want to shake the druid's hand. What a shocker! What a horrible breach of etiquette. After shaking their hand, I turn to offer problem player the same gesture. What an offense, right? Naturally, he punches me in the face for daring to shake hands with nobility. The DM has magic items that have player versus player damage. It's at this point that I am wondering if she realizes that she could have just talked with the players and agreed to not allow PvP. Now, problem player just declared that he was going to punch me in the face, and rolled for it, throwing out abilities and such, and calculating the total damage. This is level 1 by the way. The DM does not call him out on rolling without permission, which was a massive red flag for me. Gus tries to say that he steps in front of the blow, but is ignored, and I take about half my total HP and damage. Level 1, I guess it's fair. Bard versus Barbarian, who's gonna win that fight? I refuse to leave the clearing until I get an apology, so naturally Gus apologizes to me, and we move forward into the forest, following some plotline that was a little hard to be invested in, when the only person doing the investigating was problem player, while the rest of us were just kind of along for the ride. He checked out the rotting tree. He surveyed the surrounding area. He checked out the one path forward. About 30 minutes into the game, the druid and problem player stand up for a 15-minute vape break. It's at this point that I try to gently bring up my opinions to the DM, but she tries to continue while they are gone. We take a short rest, and I spend my hit die to heal for the damage I took. Gus and I do a small bit of exploring in the woods, and I find a bag of holding. I immediately know how problem player is going to react when he sees I have this, and I know he is going to take it from me by force if necessary. But I've been trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, and the DM is ignoring my attempts to say I'm going to hide this from them. So they come back from their vape break. Pretty rude to up and leave in the middle of the game, by the way. The DM immediately asks me to tell them what I found. Now she has reskinned a bunch of items in game. Our swords are Nerf swords, other things are 90s themed, so I tell them what it is. A Polly Pocket bag. And as I pray to Paler she won't tell them what that is, she tells them what it is. Problem player immediately asked for it. I say no. If I give him the bag, I won't get it back. Fortunately, I have an in-character reason to not want to play nice with this douche. Jubilee has dealt with bullies before, and understands that you shouldn't just give them everything they want. Besides that, he was punched in the face. More than enough reason to not want to share. Problem Player explains why he wants the bag. He wants to cast Detect Magic on it. This is a half-orc barbarian. How does he have Detect Magic? I have a feat that gives me it. All of the players call bullshit, but he says that he cleared it with the DM, and that he has it because it fits his backstory. The DM doesn't remember giving permission, but decides to allow it. I shouldn't have to explain this, but for those who don't know, at level 1, the only ones who get a feat are humans. No other race does. If your backstory seems like it would, most DMs would still need to make sure you aren't metagaming your backstory to get this feat, and would still likely say you could grab it when you hit level 4. A barbarian would never have a solid backstory reason to be capable of casting a spell like Detect Magic. I still don't back down, and he finally lets out a sigh and gives a clearly half-hearted apology. I naturally thank him for the apology and still refuse to give him the bag. He is clearly only saying sorry so he can take the item and be the main character once more. He punches me again. I told you all he min-maxed his character, right? Yeah, pretty sure I did. He rolls high enough to hit before the DM can even interject and begins to roll damage. He clearly states he is trying to knock me unconscious here and is using all his skill things to do so, taking a -5 to his roll for plus damage and all that. He still hits, and Gus steps in front of the blow that would have definitely done me in if I hadn't healed. The soccer boppers that the DM was using to half damage would not have been enough. This was 7 damage, already halved. But Gus took the damage, giving me time to react appropriately. I've been playing for about an hour now. I've been in this game shop for 4. I've spent a lot of time here, hoping for a good game. I'm mature enough to recognize that my time is valuable, and that it is a waste of time to spend it here. I ask the DM if I can cast Hideous Laughter on him. She says yes, and I do. He tries to use his passive perception to add to his wisdom save, but I call him out on it. He fails the save, and his character collapses on the ground laughing. I get up, and begin packing my stuff. I apologize to the DM, and to the other players. I don't plan on returning to the game. In a moment of weakness, I tell the DM that I tossed the bag of holding to Gus, before walking off into the forest. On the car drive home, I realize how stupid that decision was. I loved Gus. He was awesome. But Problem Player never cared about me. He certainly never cared about Gus, and his strength was beyond maxed. I should have taken the bag into the forest with me. I didn't want to ruin Gus's chance at a magic item, but I really should have known that Problem Player would probably just beat him up for it once I was gone. I was really disappointed. This was supposed to be a roleplay heavy game. I loved my character, and being associated with that player made me feel sick. He was very clearly an unrepentant murder hobo, and I knew sticking around longer would have just led to murdered NPCs, and not even the DM having any fun. Remember gang, no D&D is way better than bad D&D. What we say is true. No D&D is far better than bad D&D. I'm glad that this player recognized it and decided to go ahead and leave the table. Otherwise, he was going to be constantly butting heads with Problem Player and the DM. Could the game have gotten better eventually? Sure. However, what he said was right. His time is valuable, and if he's not having a good time, go out there and make your time worthwhile. This story is from Rectoral. Why I still fear Sentient Armor as a DM. 100% this is my fault as a DM. I have a tendency to either have a couple drinks or some other stuff. Not enough to be slurred, just enough to loosen myself up. Otherwise, I'm very anxious as a DM. My one saving grace is the more my players get into what's going on, the more hyped up I get into it as well. It's a good thing for the most part, as I feel the parts the players are there for the most enjoyment of everyone. Having a great time in a roleplay conversation? Great! So am I now. Having fun just memeing after a fight for a few minutes? It's all good! There's no schedule or time we have to complete the adventure by. And as a side note, yes, I know there are some rule issues here. Anyways, this takes place in my first time DMing in 5th edition. I hadn't DM'd or really played in a long time, but I was getting the feel back of it. Cue about 20 or so sessions in, and I'm using tables for the gear they find and just trying to roll with it. I don't have a great sense of how some things are supposed to work, but I roll and get a cursed sentient set of demon armor. Okay. The players find this out as a player becomes attuned to it and triggers the curse of him wanting to wear this at all times. What follows is a sequence event of role-playing a piece of armor, trying to mount a player, while a player gets into and basically goes full waifu mode towards the armor. While he and I are laughing and having a great time, I fail to pick up that everyone else at the table is creeped the floop out as we proceed through this for about 20 to 30 minutes, ending it with a player just being like, "What the floop was that?" The player and I were both noticeably embarrassed as we realized the scene we just played out. Some notable lines almost 6 years later that the table still brings up in jest. "I just want to be in you. My friends won't care. Maybe we can find a way for me to wear you. I just want you to notice me, senpai. Are you sure I'm big enough for your holes? Don't worry, I can make it tighter." I still look back on that session and cringe at myself. Okay, overall, I gotta say, this reminds me of Kill la Kill. I haven't watched a ton of anime, but there are a couple I do remember. There's nothing really inherently bad here, except for the fact that this roleplay scene lasted for more time than what it should have been. 10-minute scene, okay, it's funny, you get the memeage out of the way, and you still get some of that cringy dialogue that's really funny, especially down the line as time goes on. It's not like either one of them was actually explicitly enjoying the entertainment and thinking about it in like a pleasurable sense. Just a good time of cringe moments with roleplay, which, let's be honest, roleplay can be cringeworthy, and sometimes, in the moment, you're gonna say something that, when you look back on it, it's like, why did I say that? Ah! But either way, this is just a funny story. Mild RPG horror story. But that's what I think. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. That's gonna do it for today, and until next time, hope you feel inspired.